The storm had long passed, but its silence still hung heavy over the plains. The outpost looked half buried under snow and ash, its antenna bent like a broken spine. Daniel stood by the doorway, hammer in hand, sealing the cracks the wind had forced open. Every strike of metal echoed through the emptiness, dull and heavy, like a heartbeat that refused to stop. Behind him, Lyra moved quietly, wrapping salvaged cloth around the child's shoulders. The girl Sira watched Daniel with wide, curious eyes. She had stopped trembling, though her voice was still a whisper when she spoke. Outside, the sky remained gray, the kind of gray that never promised warmth. Daniel checked the radio again. Static, only static. The colony had cut him off. He'd known it would happen. Mercy, after all, was treason when compassion had no currency. Supplies wouldn't come. Fuel rations would dry up. And sooner or later, someone would be sent to make an example of him. Still, when he looked at the two lives warming themselves by his fire, he felt no regret, only the weight of responsibility. Lyra hadn't spoken much since that night. She worked without being asked, tidying the sleeping mats, cleaning melted snow from the floor, helping wherever she could. Yet every movement carried tension, like a soldier trapped between gratitude and fear. Her eyes followed Daniel constantly, studying him as though trying to find the hidden motive she still believed must exist. That morning, as he poured tea into a cracked tin cup, Daniel finally said, "You can stop waiting for the trick." Lyra looked up sharply. "What?" "The condition," he replied, sipping from his own cup. "The price. You keep waiting for it to appear." Her jaw tightened. "Because it always does." Daniel didn't answer. The heater hummed in the silence. Then Sira broke it with a soft laugh, a sound as fragile as glass. She was trying to coax a spark from the small lamp Daniel had fixed for her, clapping her hands when it flickered to life. For a moment, the room didn't feel like exile. But by midday, the air changed. A drone passed overhead, just a shadow against the clouds, but enough to make Lyra pull her daughter close. Daniel froze. Drones meant surveillance. Surveillance meant reports. He turned off the heater immediately and dragged a tarp across the window. The faint hum faded into distance, but unease remained. When he turned, Lyra was staring at him. "They will come," she said. "I know. Then why stay?" He paused at that. "Because running only tells them they were right." Her eyes softened just a little. It was the first time she seemed to consider that maybe his defiance wasn't pride, it was belief. As the day waned, snow began falling again, thin and almost graceful. Daniel used the time to repair the old transmitter, coaxing a weak current through its corroded circuits. Static filled the air, followed by a faint coded pulse. Then a voice. "All border posts to report. Search squads en route." The words sliced through the room like a blade. Daniel muted the signal and looked toward Lyra. Her expression was unreadable, but her hands trembled. "They'll find us," she whispered. "Not yet," Daniel said. He rose, setting aside his tools, and began stacking crates by the back entrance, building makeshift barricades. "This isn't the first storm that's come for me." Lyra stood, her voice steady despite the fear in it. "Then teach me." He turned, surprised. "If you fight," she continued, "I won't hide again. You gave us warmth. I can give you strength." Daniel studied her. Tall despite her frailty, scarred but unbroken. He handed her a short iron bar from his toolbox. "Start with this," he said. "Not for killing, for building." She frowned, but followed him outside. Together they reinforced the perimeter fence, freezing fingers fumbling with wire and bolts. Daniel showed her how to anchor the poles, how to spot weak points where the wind or men could break through. The cold bit deep, but they kept working until night fell, and the outpost once again stood defiant against the horizon. When they returned inside, Sira was asleep, curled near the fire with Daniel's old jacket draped over her like a cocoon. Lyra crouched beside her daughter, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "She dreamed of this," she murmured. "Of warmth, of safety. I told her such things didn't exist anymore." Daniel sat opposite her, wiping grease from his hands. Then tonight, you proved yourself wrong. Lyra looked at him then. Not with suspicion, but with something close to sorrow. You don't understand. My people believed that kindness was just another weapon. Every gift demanded loyalty. Every favor was a leash. You've done what no one does, and that terrifies me more than any soldier. Daniel leaned back, eyes fixed on the low-burning fire. Maybe mercy should terrify the cruel. Outside, the wind howled like it was trying to erase the world. Inside, two strangers, once enemies by birth, sat across from each other in the dim light, both changed in quiet, irreversible ways. Hours passed. The fire dimmed to embers. Daniel wrapped his coat tighter, exhaustion gnawing at him. Then, faintly, through the static hum of the broken radio, came a new signal, short bursts, repeating rhythmically. Lyra lifted her head, recognizing the cadence before he did. Her voice dropped to a whisper. That's a colony beacon. They're calling nearby patrols. Daniel exhaled slowly, his eyes narrowing. Then tomorrow we'll need to be ghosts. But as she turned to check on Syrah, Lyra noticed something else through the frosted window. A small, distant light flickering in the darkness. More than one. Moving closer, she touched Daniel's arm. It's not tomorrow, she said. It's tonight. He crossed the room in a single stride, peering out into the storm. The lights grew larger, breaking into several beams. Search parties. The hammer he'd left by the door was still warm from his hand that morning. Now it felt like a weapon. He grabbed it, jaw set. Lyra stood behind him, silent but ready. For the first time, her fear wasn't for herself. It was for him. And as the snow swallowed the sound of distant engines, Daniel whispered, almost to himself, "Let them come." The storm had returned, but so had his resolve. The lights came closer through the storm, splitting into sharp beams that cut across the whitened landscape. Daniel's heart beat in rhythm with the hum of the search vehicles. He counted for 5 moving information, their engines muffled by the snow. He crouched by the window, his rifle cold in his hands, and whispered, "They're scanning the ridge. They'll reach the outpost before dawn." Lyra stood behind him, her breath shallow. The child slept still, wrapped tight in blankets, unaware of the danger clawing toward them. "We can't fight them all," she said. "We should flee before." No, Daniel's tone was calm, but beneath it burned iron. "If we run, they'll follow your footprints to every other exile shelter. This place has defenses, food, tools. Out there, there's only death." She hesitated, torn between instinct and reason. "Then what do we do?" He turned to her, eyes steady. "We prepare." They moved fast. Daniel showed her how to secure the doors with metal rods, how to block the vents so heat wouldn't give them away on scanners. Lyra followed every instruction, her movements quick and silent. Outside, the glow of the patrols shimmered faintly through the storm like hungry eyes searching for movement. By the time the first light crested the hill, the outpost had turned into a fortress of shadows. Daniel and Lyra crouched beside the wall, rifles ready. He spoke in a low murmur. "They'll sweep the area, maybe call out. Don't answer. Don't shoot unless I do." The engines stopped. Silence again, then the crunch of boots on snow. Voices carried through the wind, distorted but unmistakably human. "Harper's post should be right over this rise. Command says he's harboring a native woman. Orders are clear, recover the fugitives or burn it all." Lyra's hand tightened around the weapon he'd given her. She whispered, "They would burn even a child?" "They've done worse," Daniel said quietly. The first knock came like thunder. Bang, bang. "Harper, by order of the Colonial Security Division, open this door." Daniel didn't move. His pulse slowed instead of quickening. He waited. The second round of knocking was followed by a metallic scrape. Someone trying to force the lock. Lyra's muscles tensed beside him, ready to fire. Daniel touched her shoulder gently, shaking his head. "Not yet." Outside, the soldiers muttered, frustrated. One kicked the door hard. "We know you're in there. Don't make this harder." Minutes passed like hours. Then, Abruptly, the engines revved again. The lights moved away, sweeping toward the valley below. Lyra exhaled shakily. "They're leaving." "No," Daniel murmured. "They're circling, testing us. They'll return." She stared at him. "Then we can't stay hidden forever." Daniel's eyes flicked toward the child sleeping nearby. "No, but we can make sure they're not the only ones who come prepared." By morning, the storm had eased to a thin mist. Daniel left the outpost briefly, his figure half lost in the snow, to scout the perimeter. When he returned, he wasn't alone. 3 figures followed him, tall, cloaked in ragged furs, their faces masked by goggles. Lyra stiffened, grabbing for her rifle until she heard one of them speak in her native tongue. "Kin of the frost," the stranger said softly. "We heard the humans' fire still burns. We came." Lyra lowered her weapon, disbelief washing over her. "You heard?" The man nodded. "Stories travel faster than patrols. They say a human gave warmth, not chains." Daniel gestured toward the entrance. Inside, before the drone's return. Within the hour, a dozen more exiles had arrived. Families, wounded men, children barely older than Syrah. The outpost became a sanctuary again, though this time it pulsed with urgency rather than peace. Daniel organized them swiftly. "We don't have much, but we can defend this ridge if we're smart. Lyra, show them the safe routes across the ravine. I'll set the perimeter charges." She watched him work, the precision of his movements, the calm authority. He moved like a man who had stopped caring whether he lived, only that the right thing was done before he died. As night fell, the wind carried faint mechanical whirs. Lyra and the exiles crouched behind the barricades, weapons fashioned from scavenged metal. Daniel climbed the observation ledge and peered through his scope. The search convoy was back, 2 transports this time with mounted spotlights. He turned to the others. "They won't talk first." The battle began not with a shout, but with the crack of a flare piercing the sky. The patrol's lights swung toward it instantly, and the first explosion tore through the snowfield. A fuel drum Daniel had rigged earlier. The blast threw ice and dirt into the air, blinding the soldiers. Exiles opened fire, wild but determined. Lyra crouched beside Daniel, firing single, controlled shots. The recoil jolted through her arms, but she didn't stop. "They're pushing left," she yelled. "I see them." He pivoted, took aim, and dropped the lead trooper before the man could toss a grenade. The smell of ozone and smoke filled the air. Then silence again. The enemy retreated, dragging their wounded. Daniel pressed his hand to his side. Blood seeped through his coat. Lyra turned toward him, eyes wide. "You're hurt." He forced a small smile. "Barely grazed." But the wound was deeper than he admitted. His breath came rough, uneven. Lyra tore a strip of cloth and bound his ribs quickly, her hands trembling. "You risk everything for us," she said. "For me." Daniel met her gaze. "For what's right." Her voice softened. "In my language, we have a word for that. Drenka. It means to stand for those who cannot." He nodded slowly. "Then call me that." Outside, the wind moaned again, carrying distant echoes of more engines. The colony wouldn't stop now. They'd return stronger, angrier. That night, the exiles gathered around the fire, faces lit in amber glow. Daniel's blood-stained coat hung near the heater to dry. Lyra sat across from him, her daughter asleep against her lap. "They'll come with fire next time," she said. "I know." "Then we must choose," she continued. "Run and scatter or fight and burn." Daniel stared into the flames. "If we run, they'll erase every trace of us. If we fight, maybe the world will finally see who the monsters really are." Lyra's voice was steady. "Then we fight." Daniel looked up, their eyes locking in mutual understanding. Outside, the storm had stilled completely. The snow fell soft and slow, as if the planet itself were holding its breath before the next storm. He reached across the fire and placed his hand over hers, rough skin against scarred fingers. "Then we stand together." For the first time since the war began, Lyra didn't flinch from human touch. The fire cracked sharply, An omen, a promise. The war for mercy had just begun. The smoke from the last skirmish still clung to the horizon when Daniel made his decision. The colony's patrols had retreated, but their silence was more dangerous than their presence. He could feel the calm before another storm, the kind that always came when bureaucrats decided mercy was rebellion. By dusk, he was already loading the rover. Lyra found him tightening the straps on the supply crate, his wounded side freshly bandaged. "You shouldn't move," she said. "I can't stay." His voice was gravel, quiet but firm. "They're planning to burn the exile camps. The ones farther north, families, children. We have a day at most before the fireships lift." She blinked, stunned. "You mean to warn them?" Daniel nodded. "Someone has to." Lyra hesitated only a heartbeat before answering. "Then we're coming." He looked at her, at the child clinging to the edge of her coat. "Lyra, don't waste breath. You saved us once. Let me return it." He didn't argue. There was no time for gallantry, not in a dying world. He simply handed her a rifle and turned toward the frozen horizon. By dawn, they were moving through the wastes. The rover's engine coughed against the cold, its wheels grinding over cracked ice and buried debris from old mining stations. The sky above was the pale blue of forgotten gods, silent, indifferent, endless. Syrah sat between them, bundled in Daniel's heavy coat. Her eyes were half closed, her small fingers tracing the frost on the window. "Are we going to the stars?" she murmured in her lilting accent. Daniel smiled faintly. "Something like that." Lyra watched him from the passenger seat, studying his face as the light shifted. "Why risk everything?" she asked softly. "Your own people will hunt you. They already are." He didn't look at her. "But I can still choose who I am while they watch." She fell silent, her expression unreadable. Then, after a while, she said, "My mother used to tell me stories about the humans before the colonies. She said once you believed mercy was strength." Daniel chuckled without humor. Maybe that's why the colonies left Earth. They couldn't stand to see weakness in the mirror. The rover rattled through a pass of jagged stone spires. A bitter wind howled through the gaps, carrying faint echoes that sounded almost like voices. They passed the rusting skeleton of a crashed cargo hauler, its hull half buried in ice. Lyra traced the symbols painted on it, colonial insignia faded to ghosts. "Your people left so much behind," she murmured. "Mine are good at abandoning things," Daniel said. "Worlds, people, promises." Hours later, smoke rose in the distance, a thin, dark line curling against the pale sky. They stopped the rover at a ridge and looked down. Below them, what had once been a camp was now a graveyard. Blackened shelters sagged under melted ice, and the air shimmered with residual heat. Daniel gritted his teeth. "We're too late." Lyra knelt beside the tracks burned into the snow. "They moved fast," she said. "But maybe some fled north. There are caverns in the cliffs." Daniel nodded. "Then that's where we go." They drove through the night, following faint trails of ash and footprints that faded with every gust of wind. By morning, they reached the canyons, a labyrinth of stone carved by ancient rivers. The engine sputtered to a halt out of fuel. Daniel climbed out, scanning the valley below. "We'll go on foot." Syrah tugged at Lyra's hand. "Mama, the air smells like fire." Lyra crouched to meet her gaze. "Stay close to me. Do not run, no matter what happens." The trio descended into the canyon, the silence broken only by the crunch of snow. Then a flicker, movement ahead. Daniel raised his rifle. "Hold!" From behind a rock outcrop emerged figures wrapped in tattered cloaks. Dozens of them, exiles emaciated, hollow-eyed, but alive. A man stepped forward, his voice shaking. "You came from the outpost?" Daniel lowered the weapon slowly. "Yes, I came to warn you." The man's eyes widened. "We heard rumors. A human who gave fire, not bullets." "Rumors won't stop what's coming," Daniel said. "The colony plans to burn every camp within 100 miles. Murmurs rippled through the survivors. Fear mixed with disbelief. Then one woman spoke. a trembling whisper that carried in the still air. "We can't run again. There's nowhere left." Lyra looked at Daniel. "We don't run," she said firmly. "We gather." That night, under the shelter of the canyon walls, Daniel and Lyra worked side by side, repairing the ancient radio tower that jutted from the rock like a bone. Its cables were brittle, the panels cracked, but it could still send a signal. Daniel's fingers bled as he twisted the wires back into place. "If this works, every exile outpost will hear us. And the colony," Lyra reminded him. He met her eyes. "Let them." Syrah watched from beside the fire, eyes wide, as the radio crackled to life. Daniel adjusted the frequency, his voice steady over the static. "To anyone who still breathes," he said, "this is Outpost Harper. The colony comes with fire. Head north. There is shelter and a wall of hands that won't let you die alone." He paused, glancing at Lyra, then added, "You are not forgotten." The message repeated on loop, echoing faintly across the cold air. Lyra stood beside him, mixing with dread. "You just declared war." Daniel smiled faintly. "No, I declared we still exist." They didn't sleep that night. Instead, they watched the horizon burn in patches where the colony's ships passed overhead, dropping their payloads of fire. Yet amidst the glow, small lights began to move northward, tiny caravans of exiles answering the call. Just before dawn, Lyra approached him. "You've done what even our elders couldn't," she said quietly. "You made us believe again." Daniel's gaze stayed fixed on the burning sky. "Belief's dangerous. Gets you killed." "Maybe," she said, stepping closer, "but it also makes you alive." Her hand brushed his arm, a brief touch that lingered longer than either intended. The air between them warmed despite the cold. Then, through the static of the radio, a new sound emerged. A sharp tone, mechanical, precise. Daniel froze. "They found the signal." Lyra's eyes widened. "They're coming here." He nodded grimly. "Then we've got one chance, to hold long enough for those people to reach safety." Lyra's voice trembled, but her spine stayed straight. "Then we fight again." Daniel loaded his rifle, glancing once more at the child sleeping beside the fire. "And this time," he said, "we fight for something bigger than survival." Above them, the first red glow of thrusters split the horizon, spreading across the clouds like a wound. The colony had found them, and for the first time Daniel didn't feel outnumbered. He felt ready. The morning sky bled orange over the canyon, a false dawn lit by fire. Colony dropships cut through the clouds, their engines roaring like thunder. Dust rose from the cliffs as Daniel watched them descend, his face calm, his hands steady on the rifle. Around him, dozens of exiles, ragged but resolute, waited for his signal. Some clutched scavenged weapons, others held nothing but sharpened tools and the will to stand. Lyra moved among them, her voice low and commanding. "Keep the children in the lower caverns. Stay quiet until the signal. No one breaks rank." Her skin caught the morning light, scarred and luminous, a living banner of defiance. When she reached Daniel, she didn't speak at first. She simply placed her hand on his shoulder. "They'll come hard," she said. He nodded. "Then we'll hold harder." Below, the colony troops deployed in perfect formation. Their armor gleamed, their banners flapped in the burning wind. A loudspeaker blared through the canyon. "This is Commander Voss of the Colonial Security Division. Surrender the fugitives and the man known as Harper. Lay down your weapons, and you may yet live." Daniel stepped onto the ridge. "You already burned the ones who laid down their weapons," he shouted back, his voice carrying like a gunshot through the stone. "You'll find no cowards here." A pause. Then, a single word, "Fire." The sky erupted. Plasma bolts streaked through the air, scorching rock and sand. Daniel dove behind a barricade as debris rained down. Exiles returned fire with whatever they had, rifles, slingshots, old mining charges. The canyon filled with smoke, the sound of defiance roaring against the organized brutality of the colony's attack. Lyra moved like a storm, darting between cover, pulling the wounded to safety. When an explosion tore open a path to the lower caverns, she sprinted straight through the fire to block the entry. "Not this way!" she shouted, waving her rifle. "Keep them safe." Daniel crawled beside her, bleeding from his shoulder. "They're flanking from the east ridge. We'll lose the pass if we don't seal it." "We can't hold both sides," she warned. "We don't have to," he said. "We collapse it." He pointed toward the old mining tanks stacked along the ravine. They were filled with leftover fuel, volatile, ancient, enough to turn the pass into a wall of fire. Lyra understood immediately. Her eyes widened. "You'll kill yourself." Daniel's lips curved in a grim smile. "Maybe, but you'll live. That's the point." She grabbed his wrist. "No. You taught me that mercy isn't weakness. You don't prove it by dying." He looked at her, really looked. At the woman who had once stood at his door trembling, now fierce as the storm itself. "Then help me make it count," he said. Together they moved through the chaos, planting detonators along the ridge. Every second was a race between fear and resolve. Plasma bolts carved the air, melting snow into rivers of steam. The exiles fought with desperate courage, shouting words in their native tongue that Daniel didn't understand. But he understood their meaning. Hope, rage, faith. When the last charge was set, Daniel turned to Lyra. "Get everyone to cover." "I'll stay until it's done," she said stubbornly. "Lyra," she cut him off with a single look. "Don't waste breath arguing." He laughed once, a sound half broken, half alive. Then he pressed the detonator. The explosion tore through the canyon like the wrath of gods. Fire leapt skyward, swallowing the eastern ridge in an inferno. The shockwave knocked them both to the ground. For a heartbeat, the world vanished in light and noise. Then came silence, deep and absolute. When the smoke cleared, the colony's left flank was gone. Dozens of soldiers lay scattered, their formation broken. Those who survived stumbled back, disoriented. The exiles rallied, pushing forward with renewed fury. But Daniel didn't rise. Blood pooled beneath him, dark and thick. Lyra crawled to his side, her hands slick with soot and tears. "No," she whispered, shaking him. "Stay with me." He blinked slowly, eyes glassy but focused. "Did it work?" She nodded, choking back a sob. "You stopped them. You saved us." His lips curved into a faint smile. "Then that's enough." She gripped his hand, her voice breaking. "You said mercy should terrify the cruel. So live and keep terrifying them." His gaze softened. "You'll have to do that for me." His breath hitched. "Teach Sira what it means to choose." "No," she said fiercely. "We'll both teach her." But he was already fading. His last words were barely a whisper. "Keep the fire alive." The sun broke through the smoke just as his hand went still. Lyra bowed her head over him, her body shaking, not with despair but with something sharper, purpose. Around them, the sound of gunfire slowed. One by one, the colony soldiers lowered their weapons. The sight of humans and exiles fighting side by side, bleeding for one another, had broken something deeper than command. Commander Voss stood amid the retreating troops, disbelief carved into his face. "You think this changes anything?" he shouted across the distance. Lyra rose, Daniel's rifle in her hands. "It already has." He stared for a moment longer, then turned away, signaling withdrawal. The colony forces pulled back, their banners torn, their certainty shattered. When night fell, the canyon burned with new light, fires not of destruction, but of remembrance. Exiles gathered around the central pyre where Daniel's body rested, draped in his coat. Children whispered his name like a prayer. Lyra stood before them, her face streaked with ash and tears, her voice clear. He was no savior. He was a man who chose kindness when cruelty was easy. That choice will not die here. In the distance, the surviving soldiers watched silently. Some removed their helmets. One dropped his weapon into the snow and walked away. As dawn rose again, the first banners of unity were raised, stitched from torn cloth, human and alien symbols intertwined. The canyon no longer felt like exile. felt like beginning. Sira stood beside her mother, clutching the small lamp Daniel had repaired. "Will he see us from the stars?" she asked softly. Lyra smiled faintly, eyes glistening. "He doesn't need to. He's here." She placed her hand over her heart. "Every time we choose mercy, he's here." The wind stirred the flames, carrying embers upward, tiny sparks vanishing into the pale morning sky. The world below was scarred, but alive. And in that fragile peace, Lyra whispered into the wind, "You kept your promise, Daniel Harper. Now we'll keep yours." The fire burned brighter, defying the cold. The rebellion had begun, not with hate, but with the courage to be kind in a world that had forgotten how.